Of course, there's the ongoing hurt that's being felt by so many people in rural Australia about the drought. The big divide between city and countries writ large. It's not just about 4G, 5G, access to the NBN and all these other things. It's down to water. Water is the thing that, in my view, is the number one issue in Australia today. We've been talking about it on this program for 18 months or more. And we're not going to stop talking about it, not because I've got nothing else to say, but I just believe it is the number one issue. States, again, are responsible for land management and water management. The feds, though, have a role in that there's a bunch of laws that have crept into our legal system over the last 20 years or so, and I must admit I voted for some of them, but their use is now being used by state governments to decline simple projects, building dams, decline building quarries. You can't build anything without water. You can't have regional migration without water. You can't grow crops without water. Towns are dying and people are leaving because the water is not there. And yet Canberra is still sitting on its hands, still not really doing what it needs to do, handing out the salve, handing out the forms, handing out the paperwork, thinking, oh, well, the drought's broken, all this water's fallen, we must be okay. The drought hasn't broken. There's still no plan for water. So, unless we get the kind of passion, ambition, vision, get off the fence, pick which side of the fence you want to be on things like climate change, and stick with it, we are just going to continue to manage the decline of this country. And it pains me to say it. The United Nations and some of the treaties we've signed up to need to be reviewed. If that's the impediment, get rid of it. We need to be able to manage our forests in the way Australia needs to manage it. We need to be able to manage our lands in the way Australia needs to manage it. And we need to create water schemes that will bring this country together. Whether you're a recent arrival migrant or whether you've been here for generations, whether you're a traditional Australian, we're all brought together by water. Let's find that kind of unity ticket and let's do something about that. Vision 2020. That's my challenge to the Prime Minister tonight, and I hope that he takes up that challenge. Well, two blokes who know a little bit about water because they're also committed to us, join us in the first half hour of tonight's program. And they're from the Bradfield Party. Well, certainly one of them is. He's the founder of the Bradfield Party, and he joins us in Melbourne, Matthew Spurgeon. Good to have you with us, Matthew.
Gary, thank you for having us on.
And David Stockwell, PhD, is an ecosystem engineer and scientist. He knows all about that. He's very supportive of the Bradfield Scheme, though not technically part of the Bradfield Party, so we will call him your independent advisor. Matthew, good to have you with us, David.
Thank you, Gary.
It seems pretty clear to me, Matthew, first off, that we have a lot of water in Australia, a metre of water falling in far north Queensland the last few days, and the promise of more to come. But the water's not falling where we need it to be, and getting that water from way up north to somewhere down south, like the Murray and the Darling, is a good project. Why the Bradfield Party?
Well, firstly, that problem's not new to humanity. I mean, the Romans had the same problem back 2,000 years ago, Sri Lankans with some of their water projects, the Persians with the Kanats. Water has always fallen through civilisation in areas where it wasn't necessarily needed. And humans have been moving water vast distances for a long, long period of time. And this is no different.
Well, it seems to me, Matthew, that we're lucky that we've got away with being so lazy for a long time in this country. We haven't done this.
Well, we're quite fortunate. I mean, back in the 1930s, we had a population of 5 or 6 million people. The world had a population that took over 2 billion. There was no need. Australia was able to feed itself and provide vast amounts of export, of primary export, from a thin strip of land along the eastern seaboard. Now, that's no longer the case. We've just hit 25.5 million. By 2050, we'll be between 35 and 50 million people, depending on what you read. And the world's currently in 7 billion people, and we're heading towards 9 to 10 billion people by 2050. We need irrigation in order to feed ourselves, and Australia must be food self-sufficient.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I mean, David Stockwell, as I said, you're not part of the Bradfield Party, but you're empathetic to the cause of the Bradfield scheme. I mean, a Queensland engineer, 1938, the bloke who designed the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Story Bridge, amongst many other things, came up with this plan 80 plus years ago, and it was pilloried, it was scorned upon, and yet it's still there. It's still being talked about. We need a Bradfield-type scheme to get water moved around. How can we do it?
Well, Gary, the plan has changed a lot in the last 80 years. There used to be the idea that we had to dig tunnels and we had to pump the water over the Great Dividing Range. It turns out that there's actually a very good gravitational route for water from a dam in the upper Burdekan River all the way down past Charters Towers, through Lake Buchanan and Lake Galilee, down through Barcaldine, even Quilpie, and even all the way to St George. And so it's with this new plan in mind that we can actually cheaply deliver large amounts of water from the monsoonal rain in the upper Burdekan River, that we can create these irrigation districts and revitalise inland Australia.
And you know about eco-science. I mean, that's your PhD, that's your area of study and speciality. Getting water into these areas will revitalise them in every possible way. It'll green up the west.
Oh, absolutely. You could have a nature corridor associated with this channel, which would allow animals, birds, and even fish to move up and down from their from catchment to catchment, create new spawning grounds, and really create a nature reserve associated with the development.
I mean, you must be looking with a bit of envy as, you know, thousands of millimetres of water, you know, metres of water falling in North Queensland right now, going out onto the Great Barrier Reef. And I remember John Bradfield said that one of the things that would come out of the Bradfield scheme would be we wouldn't be bleaching the coral reef anymore, that we'd actually be creating these new ecosystems, but the water would be retained. It would be actually used for the purposes of humankind.
Well, that's right. And once we had this backbone set up with irrigation systems and weirs along the channel, we can tap in water from other places and then distribute it all the way down the channel. So wherever it's falling in the state, a system of pipelines could create a grid just like a superhighway, except this time it's water.
Well, there's a lot of money being spent on this inland rail project, Matthew Spurgeon, that'll connect Brisbane and Melbourne, and it's a good thing. I have no difficulty with the concept of it. You know, the idea of a water superhighway's got some real appeal to me.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, I mean, how do we make this happen? You've set up this Bradfield Party, Matthew. You're going to stand in 151 seats. You're going to make it the issue at a federal election somewhere down the track. Why don't you just go and grab some of the other parties and get them to sign up to the kind of science that David's talking about?
At the moment, we've gone to other parties, and there's not a lot of support out there. There's really... we don't know why. It seems like everyone we talk to, if we go to the pub, if I'm going home for Christmas to my country hometown, if I'm out and about with work, anyone I talk to about the Bradfield scheme and the modified Bradfield scheme that we're putting together is 110% behind it. We just cannot understand why governments and the people in power aren't behind it. I've actually got a feeling that they really do support it, but they're just looking for someone to push them into a corner, so they have to do it. And we are the people, we are the party that's going to push them into the corner.
There's a lot to untangle here. You know, there's a UN treaty that actually dictates whether you can lift the height of the Warragamba Dam because it impacts on national heritage land. There's UN treaties that deal with the amount of water that's got to go down to look after the bird life at the mouth of the Murray. And yet we've got fish dying in the Murray River still, even after all the floods. So surely the feds have got to at least say, in principle, we want to do something about water. I think your point that our population's quintupled since the 1930s, is reason enough for us to have a good look at this.
Well, absolutely. By harvesting as little as 5% of the water that falls in the upper Burdekan, we can deliver 4 Sydney harbours of water every year into St George, right at the top of the Darling, and that can be split 4 ways between each state. Each state should be paying for it. I mean, Dan Andrews should be able to put his hand in his pocket. He was able to pay $1.3 billion for a road that he didn't even build. That was to get out of a contract. So when politicians want money, they find it. So don't let there be any mistake. It is completely affordable.
Well, David, now there is all this water, as I said, falling in North Queensland. Already there's talk in the media the last couple of days about the North Queensland hydro project. 700 new jobs are being created out of that. So, I mean, there's not just water that's going to be of some benefit. If you can actually contain, control, direct water in certain ways, there's an electricity benefit as well.
Well, there is, and there's also the benefit of jobs. I mean, a scheme like the Bradfield scheme that we're proposing would produce at least 7,000 jobs, 10 times that sort of amount.
7,000 jobs could be created in what, in a construction preparation stage? Is that what you're saying?
In the construction stage. And so that's not taking into account the jobs that are created as a result of the irrigation districts that are set up and all of the ancillary industries that are set up. And then, of course, the water can be used to supply mines of the Galilee Basin, such as the Adani mine, so that the water doesn't need to be used for, so that the surface water and subsurface water doesn't need to be tapped on. So there are environmental benefits as well in enabling expansion of industry in inland Queensland without the environmental risks.
So, Matthew Spurgeon, I'm going to ask you all the political questions because, you're the founder of this Bradfield Party. I mean, it beats me why the Greenies aren't all on board saying we want the Bradfield. It is the #1 issue that can bring all Australians together. Why wouldn't environmental activists want to be rallying for the Bradfield scheme?
We ask ourselves the same question. If you look at the negativity that we've seen, that's where it's coming from, primarily. From the green side of politics, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, keep going. It's all right.
So we've spoken to all sides of Parliament and of politics, and we just can't get any traction with either of the major parties. But like I said, I'm sure there are good people in politics, and I'm sure they just need the right motivation to do this. And the only motivation we can come up with is they've got to be scared of losing their seats.
Well, I mean, Bob Catter's in favour of, Pauline Hanson's in favour of, Deb Freckington says she's in favour of reviewing and getting bureaucrats to have a look at it, so at least there's a step in the right direction. Scott Morrison told me directly, he said, what we need are state governments who want to do something about water planning. I'm just bringing you up to speed, this is just what I've been told. So Scott Morrison said it's the problem of state governments that need to do it, and it is to many extent true, because the Snowy Mountain Scheme was a joint project between the Commonwealth Government and the Victorian and New South Wales Government. They owned it jointly. Just recently, the Feds bought the Victorians and the New South Wales Government out. So, but what we're talking about here, it seems, is if we got the South Australian Government, Victorian Government, ACT, New South Wales, Queensland Government and the Commonwealth Government all signed up to it, that's 6 governments, we could actually get an agreement that this thing in principle should be looked at.
Absolutely. And then as soon as you get an agreement in principle, you start with the study. You bring the engineers in, and you are ready within a very short period of time to start work on it.
Well, let me say that last week I also had conversations with people who are involved in the migration and settlement space. And a lot of people who've migrated to Australia are desperately looking for something to hang their hat on. And I mean, Matthew, in earlier generations, and we've still got the children and the grandchildren, and indeed the great-grandchildren of the heroes who came off the boats and worked on the Snowy Mountain Scheme in the 40s and the 50s and into the 60s. Migrants today want that. It is not just simply a city-country divide, there is also a migrant and long-term Australia divide that we could actually bridge here with this kind of big nation-building vision.
Absolutely. We need to be proud. The long-term Australians also need to be proud of what we're doing and of our country. And there's no better way than to assist and have everybody that's recently arrived, and they're wonderful people, wonderful additions to our country. And let's get them in there building something for our nation, a true nation-building project that everyone can be proud of. You work hard, you slap each other on the back at the end of the day, and you go down the pub for a beer. What better way to get people back into the Australian way of life, getting people, and everyone will be loved. The entire, getting people to the country too is a far better way to integrate them, and it's just a better lifestyle out in the bush, and that's where we want more people to move to. We desperately need to stop the rural decline. We need to stop the exodus of people from rural cities and from rural towns. We need to reverse it and get people moving from the cities to the country so that they can get better lives, to ease the congestion, ease the strain on the lack of infrastructure that we have in the cities, because they're growing so fast at the moment with our immigration. It's a wonderful thing. Immigration's been one of the best things for this country, one of the best things this country's ever had. And we just need to manage it in such a way that we get people into work as fast as possible, into meaningful work as fast as possible. And there's no better way than to take everybody and have everybody moving to the bush, to build these projects, to work in them, to create lives, send their kids to school in the bush. Everything will work so much quicker. Integration will happen so much quicker.
Yeah, I think you're right. And at the moment, of course, they're talking about having to look at the brand Australia when it comes to tourism. I'll tell you what, brand Australia is in trouble when it comes to migration as well. We've got an issue there which we're going to develop over the next couple of months. So, David Stockwell, one last question to you. As somebody who understands how ecosystems operate, does Bradfield really deliver the kind of advantages that John Bradfield posited 80-odd years ago, that we'll see climates improve, there'll be more moderate climates because there'll be more regular rainfall, because there'll be more trees? It makes sense to me, but I'm only a year six student when it comes to these sort of earth sciences.
Well, Gary, there will always be droughts and there'll always be floods in the Australian bush. But what this type of scheme does, it can smooth out those variations so that we can create an agricultural industry that avoids this cycle of destruction that happens periodically. And in the regions around where the irrigation takes place, such as Deniliquin, where they've done a lot of irrigation, there's been a moderation of temperatures. So they haven't been heating as fast as other parts of Australia because of the extensive irrigation in those parts of the world. So yeah, there is evidence of a local effect on the climate as a result of irrigation schemes.
Yeah, well, I think that's just another bit of climate change that maybe we can affect. There will be man-made climate change if you actually do something about the Bradfield scheme. Seems pretty evident to me, basic assumptions that need to be tested, but that really is what we need to do next. David Stockwell, thank you so much for your time, and really would like to get you back another time to have a more in-depth discussion, but appreciate your time tonight. Matthew Spurgeon with the Bradfield Party. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from you too, sir, as the politics of water becomes writ large and loud between now and whenever the next election, federal election is. But it really is a state issue. You're going to run in state seats too?
Yes. We will be running in state seats coming up. We need to ascertain which seats we will be running in, but we'll be lending support through state seats as well. But in the meantime, we have our Facebook page and our Twitter page, and also our brand new website, which went up live today. Membership to the Bradfield Party is free. It always will be free. We are not here to make money. We are here to deliver 4 Sydney harbours of water to the top end of the Darling year after year after year. That's all we want to do. And it will still be going in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, when I'm somewhere else.
Yep. Well, I think it's a lot like Australia's Brexit in a lot of ways. Bradfield, get it done would be my view, and good to talk to you, Matthew. We'll have you back another time as well.